Welcome to Grappling with the Gray, a forum for promoting an ethical mindset and ethical decision-making to help us more clearly see both sides of complex issues and better navigate the moral challenges of everyday life. I'm Rabbi Anderson Goldson, and I'd like to welcome my guest today. With me is Richard Bistrong. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You did. Thank you. Pleasure to join everyone.
Richard is CEO of Frontline Anti-Bribery LLC, assisting organizations with ethics, compliance, and anti-bribery challenges to help surface unknowns and shine a light on the real-world importance of operationalizing ethics and integrity. Ron Carucci is owner and managing partner of Navalent, helping organizations articulate a strategy for success, translate that strategy into results, and develop exceptional leaders along the way. And Heather Younger is a certified speaking professional and LinkedIn learning instructor. She is also CEO and founder of Employee Fanatics, helping equip companies and organizations with the intelligence they need to improve the quality of work life for their employees. Thank you all for being with me today.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
And here is our topic for today. Earlier this summer, a CEO and tech entrepreneur named Ron Dance ignited a firestorm on Twitter with a post titled, "Things I'm Sick of Hearing from My Employees." His list included, "Can I leave early today? I'll be in late this morning. My child is sick and I rush off. I've got a doctor's appointment tomorrow. Is that okay? I'm going to be late back from lunch. I've got some things to sort." He concludes with this pithy editorial remark, "I don't care." Not surprisingly, the post attracted a barrage of critics, decrying his insensitivity and calling him a variety of colorful names, to which he replied with a short question. Did you finish reading the whole post? Because he concludes with these comments, quote, "I hired you for a job and I fully trust you to get it done. I don't need you to account for every single hour. Times have changed and the workplace is different these days. People are sick of being treated like children. All that should matter is that everyone is happy and that the work gets done. My advice to companies, treat your staff like adults. That's it. That's the big secret. Give them autonomy, respect that they have lives outside of work. Don't gaslight them into being grateful for not being fired every day. Output should always trump hours," unquote. One of my personal mantras is that trust is the T in ethics. But is it wise to trust that readers will make it to the end of a provocative post and not miss the twist at the end? Does this style come across as snarky or refreshingly candid? Is it worth the risk of being misunderstood to make a critical point in an impactful way? And aside from style, is Rob Dance's advice practical in a culture where so many employers complain about workers slacking off and shirking their responsibilities? And if it is, why does it seem to be so rare? The floor is open.
I'll go first.
Please do.
I think one of the things that hits me is a conversation I had with someone about this idea of being polarizing, and that, like, in order to get all the views, in order to get all the attention, you have to be very extreme in your position. And I feel like the way he put this post forward was very much kind of the trend to get more eyes on a post, the trend to get more attention on things. Start off very controversial. I think you're right to allude to, like, number one, is that right? Because most people aren't reading through an entire post, which is why making it very long or like non-storytelling isn't going to keep them engaged. So I think, do I think it's right or have an opinion about it? I'm not sure, as far as like how we started one way and ended the other. I do know it is the trend. I'm not sure I like it very much. And so those are my 2 cents just right off the front.
Gentlemen?
Well, I think there's like the form and the substance, right? So for a CEO to be putting out like a company, it's essentially a company policy statement. A CEO can't parse that out. And to make such a statement and think that social media is the place to do it, when people, I haven't counted the characters, but I doubt I would have made it to the end of that either. So, Ron and I share a friend and colleague, Allison Taylor, who talks about, like, we live in a hyper transparent world. So I think for a CEO to make a statement like this, I think the form of that is bad. And on a little bit of a lighter side, when I read this, it reminded me of the story when General Colin Powell became the head of the State Department in 2001, right? That's, I think, before, as Heather was sharing, we had these sort of polarizing discussions. He said his opening remarks when he gathered everyone together at the State Department, he said, the one thing you don't need to do is think that you're going to impress me by being the last person to leave the building. That won't impress me. And someone said, what will impress you? And he said, push-ups. Okay. But he then followed it with, what impresses me is get your job done. Right? That's what impresses me. And I think, back in 2001, that resonates just as much as it does now.
I think if this gentleman were my client, and I unfortunately didn't get the benefit of talking to him before he posted it, I would have asked him, what was your intent? When you sat down at the computer or at your phone and you started to write this post on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever you put it on, what were you hoping to accomplish? What did you want to have happen? Being that as a CEO, your life takes place on the Jumbotron, your visibility is extended. There are 20 versions of you out there already. Now there's going to be a 21st version of you out there. Maybe you want that, maybe you don't. And everything you say and do is amplified. So were you looking to damn your employees and make them feel dumb? Were you looking to sort of make some statement about your own leadership? Because it's going to be seen as very self-promotional when you get to the end of it. So even if you got to the end of it, I'm not sure that it changes the flavor of what you posted. It just makes you look more self-promotional and a little bit more self-righteous. And so if you told me, I wanted to promote leaders trusting their employees, or I wanted my people to know they don't have to make excuses for when they're going to be gone. Whatever you tell me your goal was, I would then say, okay, now look at this social media post that goes on below the fold. In hindsight, would this have been the best way to accomplish that goal? Or now that you have the benefit of hindsight, would you have done something differently? But I just think that whatever he was trying to accomplish couldn't have been what happened. And whatever he did accomplish was very foreseeable. The misunderstandings, the misattributions, the misunderstanding of who he is, the intent to affirm his employees ended up being insulting. Like all the outcomes that didn't happen that he would have wanted, you could have, a 10-year-old could have predicted. So that deepens my question around him as a leader, as his, how do you make judgments when you're making choices for how you send messages, for how you embody messages, because you are the message. How are you making what's the criteria you're using to say, I want this to happen, I'm going to do this to get it to happen? And how effective are you in connecting those cause and effect dots? Because this would clearly tell me that in this moment you weren't effective.
Yeah, which I think all ties in with your original point, Heather, about being provocative. And it sort of raises in my mind the question of the difference between being provocative and being thought-provoking. I know in my writings, I will often try to start off with something that alludes to a point of view other than the one I'm going to make, because I want to force my readers to actually think about the different sides of the issue, and maybe draw in some people that might not be so inclined to be with me. But that's an article, and to your point, Richard, a post, the attention spans are almost non-existent. And personally, I really admire the point he was trying to make, but the style that he used, well, I think we've sort of got a consensus on that.
Right message, wrong format.
I'm not even sure he's offended with us being offended, or that by anybody else is being offended. Because I decided to dive a little further and went to his that rock website, and it kind of threw me off. I don't know if you all did that, but I went to his website and it says on the screen on the homepage, you click, it says scroll down, but when you scroll down, it freaks you out a little bit because it actually scrolls right. So the screen just goes like it just moves across the screen. So it says scroll down, like you keep going on the right. And that's, I think, the point of just the embodiment of the message that you mentioned earlier, Ron, was that idea of I'm going to be flipping a lot of things just completely on its head, and I'm probably not here to be adored. I expect work to get done. We're going to be extremely innovative. We're going to throw things, throwing and people were just, there are people who are that way, which the majority of are not. It kind of goes like you think like the Musk and the Bezos and these people, and we're like, oh, something's got to be off with these people. I was like, I don't really know what to say. They're billionaires. I mean, right? So a different way of thinking. And so wherever we are in our life, we kind of are judging how he showed up. And so I write all the time about carrying leadership. I talk about this stuff. Oh my gosh, leadership, listening, all the things I talk about. And of course, I loved the end of his message. And of course, I read it through because I don't think I would have read it through. I don't think I would have read it through if you didn't say it. I probably would have gotten about halfway through and been like, oh, well, whatever. But I had a feeling based upon how out there he was, how much he just put it out, that it was about to turn into something like juicier, like it was going to be something I could agree with. So I think, again, going back to the original point of like provocative or thought-provoking, I was kind of waiting for him to be like, however, or but, or I was just waiting for it. But I don't know if I would have done it if you didn't kind of bring this up to the front, which is why you're doing this, Jonathan, right? And not me.
I think I'm so used to leaders just kvetching on social media that I would have stopped at he's bitching about his employees, that was going to be a post about slacking off. I think, one of the things that most executives don't get the memo on is you are a brand, and your brand fits within the brand of your organization. And so every message you send, every email you send, every video you make, you have to remember you're creating a red thread of some kind. Are you creating the red thread you intend to create? Because I would argue that if this man is really passionate about empowerment and giving discretionary time and freedom and rewarding people for results, not for face time, that there's a kindness that has to accompany that there's a tone of that. So his tone belies the message in a not helpful way. And so I would want him to remember that every day you are earning that brand. Every day you are earning a reputation of some kind, and consistency and the creation of experience of you over time is critical. And so you have to remember that, how many LinkedIn posts have we seen of the video of the leader who was being taken, they didn't know they're being videoed, and that in the meeting where they're firing people, and you're done. Like, I mean, these moments live on forever. And so are you recognizing that when before you hit post, is there anything in that content that you would, in the light of day tomorrow, go, I wish I had done that differently? And I just think in this case, there was an impulse. It felt like there was an impulsivity there to be provocative for the sake of being provocative, which is really very self-serving.
Well, I think it may go back to Heather's point that, let's take a what if, because we don't really know. If this is his style and it's the style of his company and it's what his people expect from him and it's what they've gotten used to, then maybe in the context of the business, it would be appropriate. Then you have to ask, well, since he's putting it on social media, is he worried about all the things you've just described, Ron, that he could do to his own reputation? Or is his attitude, no, I'm really only looking for the people who are in line with my thinking? I mean, I started thinking about, I don't know if you remember the name Lenny Bruce. He was a comedian back in, I guess, the 60s, who started with just using profanity wholesale. And, some people are never going to like that. It does have that shock value, and some people like to be shocked. Of course, now you can't really shock anybody with anything. Richard, any thoughts? You're muted, Richard.
You're really aging us with Lenny Bruce.
Yeah, I know. What can I do?
But I really like the parsing of being provocative, versus being thought provoking. And from an ethics and compliance perspective, companies are really struggling with their social media policies right now. Because, as an employee of a multinational, like it or not, you are a brand ambassador of what you put out. But yet there is the right to say, I should be able to tweet what I want, right? About my own off work hour issues. So companies are really trying to figure out that trust part of the messaging. And the CEO will certainly set an example. So if your CEO is putting out deliberately provoking, and potentially, tweets or social media posts that are going to be divisive, what is the rest of the workforce going to do with that? So I think particularly as you drill down into how companies are having to deal with this and they're struggling with it, they are certainly going to look to leadership to see what are they putting on LinkedIn and what are they putting on Twitter or even Instagram, because, I'm going to sort of follow that lead as well. So this type of communication format cascades very quickly through an organization.
One of the things that came up to me, I would be doing the same thing, Ron. I'd be kind of, coaching people how to, write this. I talk about caring leadership. I'm going to be coaching you on how to show more care and express more care and concern. And there's something attractive to me about the post. Okay. Part of it is because I think it's a little bit countercultural and it's a little bit like against council culture type of stuff that's happening now. It's just so hard to speak up your truth, to speak the truth. Oh my gosh, we're all like offended by everything we say. And so for him, it is already what his brand is. Because again, you go to his website and it immediately is like, what the heck? I'm like, I'm all disorganized. I'm off center when I go to your website. And so that's what you do for me so that I can be shaken up and thinking differently about the world we're in or whatever it is I want to do, right? And I think this thing for me was a little bit of a shakeup. Because part of it was like, there are a chunk of people who were not offended by that post. In fact, they liked it. And maybe they agreed with that first 3/4 of it or half of it. And they were like, wait a second, he's just a smush, squishy, touchy feely right towards the end. And they were like, whatever, you were with me. I was with you until all of a sudden I saw that last quarter. And so I know this because when I'm doing training, sometimes I will do some DEI training and I'll ask everybody raise their hand. Who here feels uncomfortable with this? And a small percentage will raise their hand, but I know for sure because I read so many employee surveys in the comments, there's a chunk of people, and most of the organizations don't even like pay attention to them, don't know they exist, and they squash those voices down, who want to also speak counter to whatever's happening in the majority. So I think with this gentleman, there's just something about it that was like, huh. I don't know how distasteful that was. I mean, actually, it's maybe something I think it's a little refreshing. It might be something we need to be thinking about. That's just my spin on it.
I feel better, Heather, because I also kind of responded to his style, and to your point about you're always going to find somebody who's not happy with what you're doing. I was doing a webinar, and there were 3,500 people on this thing, and I used biblical stories to teach lessons about leadership and decision making. And they sent me the chat afterwards. And people were very enthusiastic, but about halfway through, someone said, is anybody else bothered how many times God is being mentioned? And the person just got buried. He's not talking about God, he's telling stories, he's teaching lessons. Get over yourself. I think if I lose one person out of 3,500, I can live with that.
But there may have been more than 35. There may have been more than one. But this
Right.
whole like anti-pipe up thing, like I can't pipe up because I'm going to be offending like a whole bunch of other people. There could be way more than one. I mean, I'm not saying I'm just saying that's the kind of thing that happens, our culture.
Sure. I think your point, Jonathan, about if this is his brand, if this is who he is, and there's a reason he wants to be seen that way as the sort of little bit contrarian, a little bit sort of, uh, left turn in a point of view, then it was probably very effective, right? If in other words, if people have been trained, if he's trained people to expect this every day or however often he appears in public or in his company, and it's part of his charm, it's part of his charisma, it's part of how he shows up in the world, and it's consistent with how he leads. But he's also seen as a man of integrity. I'm sure then it worked fine. Um, whether or not now, the notion of did you read the rest of the post? Hopefully that was an alert to him that said, when I wrote this, I assumed people would, and when they didn't, did I have an outcome that I didn't intend?
Yeah, it reminds me of an article I wrote once, and I got an email, somebody just attacking me over my position, and I sent back an email. I said, "Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Did you notice that further down in the article, I made exactly the same point you just made?" And he emailed me back, very apologetic, saying that, thank you for your response. I read the first couple of lines. I assumed I knew where you were going, and I didn't bother to read the rest. And thank you for giving me the chance to look over what you said. So, a lot of times we don't get that opportunity.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we have to be careful because we do live in a world of short attention spans on social media. So I think Ron and I are both fans of the counterintuitive headline, right? To get people thinking and wanting to read more, but potentially heading one way, like this tweet did, and putting the counterintuitive part of it right at the end. I'm not so sure that works where we're bombarded with messaging across channels. And there was a CEO, and I think this speaks to substance, who was interviewed in the Financial Times. He was the CEO of an oil and gas company. And he said, my social media policy, in fact, my whole public persona, is I don't want to say anything or post anything that has the potential to alienate half my workforce. And I thought that was brilliant. He's like, it's one thing if it's company policy, if it's something that we're doing, if it's an initiative, but I am going to stay out of anything that has the potential to divide my workforce. I thought that was a great policy.
Yeah, I wonder, you being also in the ethics space, I find that there are many issues I would like to talk about, particularly when it gets into politics, that are so divisive without even taking an opinion. I mean, I tend to be a moderate, and a moderate is somebody with no friends. But anything I say is going to alienate at least half the people out there. And I would rather save my credibility for those issues where I might be able to reach people and blow it on issues where I'm not going to change anybody's mind. There are two types of self-censorship. There's, I'm afraid what's going to happen to me if I speak up. And there's more what we're talking about. What is my brand? And how do I preserve that in order to be able to advance my mission?
Yeah. Well, I think if you just, in this day, as political rancor is only going to intensify by the minute, I scroll through Facebook and I get depressed, and I watch, but I watch people making these obnoxiously, accusatory, conspiratory statements about whichever the candidate they hate, and uninformed. Politics depends on it relies on ignorance and being uninformed for it to thrive. But as I scroll through it, and I just like it makes my stomach knot. The paranoia and hypervigilance, it just proliferates, and so it just shuts down curiosity. It shuts down openness. It shuts down people wanting to learn. And I think in that same vein that social media is a place of polarization. It's a place of accusatory. It's a place of highly misassumptive, misattributional experiences, why any leader would want to communicate that way, in an environment where depositing information in that environment already, no matter what you say, you could say the sky is blue, put it on Facebook, and there's going to be what does he mean by that? Or that's code for, and people will make it up. And so I think, not that I want people paralyzed and, self fears of being we're all going to be misunderstood.
Yeah.
But given the environment of the day, I wonder what is the healthy amount of caution leaders should take when they share their public thoughts, whether it's on social media or other places, without being contorted into a pretzel, but at the same time not being completely reckless. This somewhere in there is a balance for the day that I'm sure is hard to strike, but I'm sure that CEO is wondering about that, post that tweet.
I'm sure. Go ahead, Zach. Go ahead, Heather.
No, I was just gonna say, Ron, I'm thinking about that last, the statement of, at the end where he says, did you not read to the end? And in that question, one of the things that it did kind of remind me of, because I was like, again, I was struggling between myself, like the thing I would normally be, let me be creative, let me think outside the box, maybe this is what he meant. Like I was doing all these things in my head, I was looking at it, and it made me think of being in a privileged position. Because because his tone was almost like, how dare you think I can worry about these little things? Just do your job. Like, I'm fine with you doing your job. I heard you do your job. Just like, don't worry me with these little things. And so that tone in there did remind me a little bit of that. And then at the end going, did you not read to the end? Like, how dare you defy my right? And so there was a little bit of that embedded in it. And it would normally, like I said, would normally gnaw on me a lot. I don't know what it is that's making me go, this is kind of interesting. I had something like this happen where we talked about kind of counter brands, like you are the message, so this is your message and you are the messenger, and to show up with consistency in this way. And I had done a post, this has been like a year ago or something, and I put a post out that was kind of like, oh, I'm just like not in the best headspace, something like that. It was something that was like a could have been a downer, I guess. And then any other person who would normally maybe post those kinds of things, it'd be perfectly normal, because I'm always showing up as like kind of ray of sunshine, uplight, motivating, motivational, all these things, right? And then all of a sudden I show up one day and I'm like, today is just not a good day, that kind of thing. And I hardly got any engagement. It's like it threw my entire universe off. And then the very next day you do the same type of things you're normally done, and then everybody's like on board with you. So you do have a huge point on like what people expect from you when you show out in the world. This idea again of us being the message and the messenger all wrapped up in one, and how much responsibility I think that's embedded in that.
It's a great point, Heather.
Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
No, I was just going to say, for a CEO and someone in a leadership position, right, Heather, you're in a fishbowl. So do you really want to take that chance in form and substance? Like, what type of messaging or what type of signal are you sending, in itself by trying to trick people that way? I think that's a big mixed signal.
It reminded me of a conversation I heard with Barry Weiss, and she became a phenomenon when she publicly left the New York Times, because she said it was just an echo chamber and nobody was entitled to have any opinions other than what was the party line. And she was saying that she went on and she's become very successful, and has a huge following. And she was saying that the compulsion to check constantly, are people following this? Are they liking it? Is it resonating? And then to start letting the expectation of what people want to hear influence what she actually puts out. And she says it's almost like a drug. You just can't eliminate that influence from your life. And so she's feeling my whole brand is about being intellectually authentic and having intellectual integrity. And I'm getting caught up in this need to make sure I keep my following. It's very odd that
Well,
we're
if
in
you,
that
I
kind
mean,
of
if
a
you were,
world.
if you were to walk into the newsroom at some of the major networks like CNN, who are writing for their blog posts, you would go out into the lobby and you would see journalists up there looking at a tote board with Google actually watching what keywords are trending. And you are expected to type, if apple pie is trending and you're writing about Trump, you need to get the words apple pie into that article. And that's what they're rewarded on. It's clickbait.
Yeah.
Same with that way at Bloomberg. It's that way at Business Insider. And I've talked to journalists there that's what they're just trying to get clickbait words into articles so they can and then they watch with a dopamine rush of watching for the likes and the clicks and the shares and the comments because that's how they're rewarded, which is really sad because it takes journalistic integrity to a new bottom.
Yeah, I'll date myself again. Remembering the times when there were 3 networks with the news each night. At what was it, 5, 6, and 11 or something, and and they were all in competition for everybody,
Right.
and so they couldn't be polarizing. They couldn't be grandstanding. They had to be able to keep a reputation for journalistic integrity, or they were just going to lose too much of the audience. And now that everything is so compartmentalized, it's exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
We're going to tell people what they want to hear because that's how we're going to keep our audience.
I wonder how much betrayal is tied up in it. Because as I was thinking through reading this post by the CEO, again, if I'm reading through it and like, Giannis, and you're like, oh, yeah, I actually like this style. And then he gets into this like Heather style, which is my style is very squishy, warm, that's the way it is. So he gets into that style later on. I just wonder how many people were like, you get to the point, you're like, oh yeah, this is my guy. He's totally speaking my language. And all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, new. And so like that sense of betrayal, like this is not who I thought it was, or this is not where I thought it was going. And how much do we experience that in all of either the content that we're reading, the interactions that we have, even just thinking about how we think we know a person, then we don't know the person. And so how much do we have a sense of personal betrayal just in uncovering the real truth, which is just kind of goes back to what you're just saying, Addison. It's kind of interesting. Are we actually ever telling the truth? I'm just going to drop that there.
No, I mean, this could lead into a whole different direction. Unfortunately, we don't have time for it because I don't want to really go there at length. But looking at the political candidates, whichever candidate you, and I'm using the general you, support, what we're seeing is people are willing to overlook all the flaws and focus on only what they find attractive. And what you're describing, Heather, is exactly what I think is wrong. There's no nuance, there's no complexity, there's no recognition that people have strengths and weaknesses, and that we have to deal with all that messiness.
Yeah.
It's just reduced everything to a binary black and white.
And to use
Good and
those
evil.
that you're amplifying to vilify the other candidate.
Right.
And that's all that's happening on social media. And how those stupid whatever and she or he, and it's maddening. It's absolutely maddening. But if you look at Jonathan Haidt's research for the last 40 something years, every election has been most people are voting against a candidate, not
Right.
for a candidate.
Yeah.
So, and I was looking back over an article I wrote in 2016 about Divided We Fall, about the polarizing, and how were we going to unify as a nation after that election. And I was reading it again today going, you could just repost it every 4 years.
Yeah.
Sadly. And this, I think this year of all the last, maybe even being the worst of all 3 of the last elections.
So maybe we can put in the show notes or somewhere reflecting on Jonathan Haidt's work. I think it was The Atlantic where he wrote the Tower of Babel, and how with social media now, we're not talking the same language anymore.
We're not.
Not talking to each other. We're talking at each other. And Allison,
about each other.
Right. And Allison, and I think we have to be careful because how this streams into our workplace is very delicate. Allison Taylor's book, Higher Ground, has all these examples of companies that have opened up internal communication channels on an issue, right? On something that has the potential to polarize a workforce. And the examples are, oh, we put this channel to talk about the election, and just as quick as they put it up, they took it down because it just spiraled out of control.
Yeah.
So I think how this seeps into our workforce, we have to be careful because we don't want colleagues having a adversarial relationship because of our social media behavior. So this is a real trust issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because what we do and what we say, I have cousins that I'm having problems with because we're sharing social media, but I don't have to work with them every day. So this is a really sticky issue.
And it's dividing families. I had a family reunion here, 40 people a couple weeks ago, and I just prayed for 4 days, politics didn't come up. Carolyn Mell, who directs the Constructive Dialogue Institute, another one of Jonathan's think tanks. I happen to be on the advisory board of both of them. But Caroline Mell and I wrote an article for HBR called "How to Prepare Your Team for a Year of Intensified Political Polarization," because it is coming in the workplace. And the last time, all the research said that it didn't go well, and division was a problem, and leaders were not knowing what to do. So we wrote an article on, okay, how do you get out in front of this? It's going to happen. As a leader, what do you do for your team to help them prepare, or how do you prepare your organization for when this happens? How do you keep people focused? How do you keep unity? How do you keep people curious? How do you stop, the barbs or the unhealthy conflict? People, I'm not working with her. You know who she's voting for, and that's happening. But we did, they do a Constructive Dialogue Institute does a lot of incredible work with companies, helping them build bridges. But it's, again, so back to the original question that you brought up with that tweet, Jonathan, is in that environment where people have trigger happy impulses to point. Do we need to think about how we adapt, how we make our points, how we express our views, not to self-edit or to dilute, but to contextualize?
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan Haidt is such an important voice today. I just love his work. And then I still remember the first time I discovered him was on his TED Talk, when he starts off by polling the audience. And he says, how many of you identify as, use the word identify, but Republicans or conservatives? How many as Democrats and or liberals? And like 85% of the audience was Democrat or liberal. And he said, this is a problem. He says, it would be a problem if it were the other way. So if you don't have a balance of perspectives in the room, then things are just going to keep tilting farther and farther toward the extreme. And we become more and more polarized. Yeah, well, that's what I try to do here. And grateful for your participation, your time, your thoughts. Richard Bistrong, Ron Carucci, Heather Younger, thank you very much.
Thank you, Anis. I appreciate you
being part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you who are watching or listening, if you have a topic you would like us to take up on a future episode, please go to my website, ethicsninja.com, use the contact information. And if it is a compelling topic, we will definitely take it up in the future. Until then, as always, encourage you to continue grappling with the gray.